And we're back. And again, what we're focusing on today, in today's lessons, it's all around mouse movement, right? Because last time we did keyboard movement. And it's important for us to understand what's happening. So what I've done in the break, and there's an updated version on GitHub, is inside my game loop, I've removed at the top where we had our fixed rotation for X and Z, took those out. But I put them inside an else statement. So that happens when the controls, below where the controls are enabled, I've made a condition where if the controls are not enabled, or for every other instance, right, then make sure that the player rotation X and Z is 0. Also, I've moved my player apply central force inside where my controls are enabled so that my central forces will not be applied when I've lost control or I've given up control back to the game. Eventually, when we press escape, I want to end the game, right? So you can end the game in a couple ways: lose or press escape, and then you should get your score. So that escape mechanism, basically that's why I've got this pointer lock control thing going, right? Because it's a mechanism for me to be able to control whether I'm in game or out of game, or whether instead of stopping the game, if I'm paused, so I can actually pause everything if I want to, stop the whole simulation. If I really want to, or continue with the simulation. And there's ways of doing that. All right, so we tried this angular velocity trick, and we noticed that we said this minus mouse controls yaw thing. That's what's happening here. When we add this new vector 3 to the set angular velocity. But one thing I want to know is where the hell am I facing? Because if I want to move along where I'm facing, that's important, right? Right now, I don't have a facing. I don't have a direction, right? And I want to be able to set a direction, okay? So we got to think about this for a second. What is the direction, and what kind of variable would direction be? Who's got a solution for that one? If I'm going to set a direction variable here at the top, right? And this is player direction we're talking about here. I'm going to set it up as a global variable later on. We're going to move it into our player class, right? But for now, I want to set up a direction. So what would be, if I'm going to set up a direction variable, what should it be? What kind of variable should it be? Okay, I hear vector 3. Anybody have a second opinion? Vector 3 is not bad, by the way. I'm just telling you that. I want to hear if anyone else has any other ideas. Could use a number. Okay. So again, how do I want to declare the variable as direction, right? First of all, let's think about how 3JS looks at direction. If I go back to my game here for a second, I want my direction to be up across this axis here. What's this axis? The Z axis, right? This is where my direction this is where I want it to be starting off in the beginning, right? So across this way, that's where I want this invisible line of direction to be. Hey, before we do this thing, can we make it so that it's a physical line instead of an invisible line? Yeah, 3JS allows us to draw all over the place. Let's do that, right? Which helps us troubleshoot a little bit. So what I want to do is here inside my variable, I want to go var. Oh, it hurts. I want to start talking about a direction line that we're going to make, right? But we need a material for it, and we're going to make this something new. I want to line something like a basic line material, right? So I want to kind of almost do one of these, line basic, right? I don't have a line basic material defined here in my aliases, so let's define it. So we have a mesh Lambert material. We have all this other stuff in our up here somewhere on line 17 as an example. I'm going to make something called line basic material. I'm going to define that as something called 3.line basic material, right? Because we want a line, we want to draw a line. Okay, and this is how you do it. It's important for us to do this. You can make your own, troubleshooting lines. This is the way I'm going to do it. Line basic material, right? So that's what my directional material is. Direction line material is. The next thing is I want to define my direction line geometry, right, as something just called geometry. So we don't know what it is yet. I want to just basic geometry, right? And then I want to create my direction line. If I can spell properly. Direction line itself as a type of line, but I don't have a line yet, so I got to go back up here and define a type, right? Because I can do 3-dot line if I wanted to, but I've got my sphere geometry, I've got my different things here, meshes and so on. I want near around mesh. I want to say import line is equal to 3-dot line. My line class. Down here, I want it to be a line. Okay. I declare my variables for my direction line. I don't have a direction object yet, just the direction line that I'm going to declare. Next, I need to declare the object that I want to make the direction line from, right? So remember that I have my player object, right? I have an axis helper, but that's not really a direction line. An axis helper is got 3 lines that are drawn, right? I only want 1 line, right? So how do I do that? I want to do that underneath where I declare my player. So if I'm going to go underneath where I got my player is defined, and then before my sphere, I want to declare my little direction line, right? So I want to say something like this. Here's add direction line. I'm going to say something like this. Direction line material then is equal to a new line basic material. And inside there, all I need to declare is the color. And I want to make my color yellow. Just make it a little different. So I want to say color is 0x. And what's yellow again? FF00 is what it is. Right? There it is. Direction line material. My direction line geometry, right, is equal to a new geometry. That's why it's got to be a basic geometry. That's the way you do it, guys and girls. Yay, I got a geometry. Okay, here's the next one. My direction line geometry, and here's the first piece, vertices dot push. This is where we're creating vertices one at a time. My first vertex for this direction line geometry, right, that I'm pushing in is a new vector3 object that's going to appear in 0, 0, 0. What's that mean? That's like my origin, right? Right? Line origin. That's what I want it to be, right? The next one I'm going to push is I want it something like pretty long, like something like 50, right? So direction line geometry dot vertices dot push. I'm going to push another one. If you notice, the vertices is a vertices array, right? I'm treating it like an array. I'm going to say a new vector3 object, right? My next vertex is 0, 0, and on the z-axis, minus 50, right? And the reason why I'm saying minus 50, this is the end of the line. Right? So the beginning of the line, line origin, end of the line. I'm telling you everything where to be drawn, right? I've got a material, which is yellow, and now I'm going to do something like this. My direction line object, right, is equal to a new line, which is going to have my direction line geometry, right, and my direction line material. That's pretty simple. That's just how we do everything, right? Geometry, material. Same thing for lines. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, I don't want to add this to the scene. I want to add this to the player, right? So I'm going to parent this line to the player. So player.add direction line. And we're going to say a console, just for housekeeping purposes, I'm going to say console.log added direction line to the player. There we go. But if everything goes well, when I go back into my scene, I should see something like this. Now when I move, is this right? Did I put this in the right place? How come? What happened? Let's try this again. Let's see what happened. Let's see why I did that. Wait. I want to see what happened. Let's say. That's okay. That worked okay this time. And now when I look left and right, I can see that my line, right, is okay. Before it was up and down. How come? Right? Because he flipped. right? And that's what I'm saying. It's so important for us to do that. If I go back and I don't cancel that. So let's just try this again. Watch. So if I go, let it go, and then refresh, and don't touch anything, what happens? Bounce, bounce, bounce. Everything's good. Okay, but he's not good. It's in the wrong place, right? So something's wrong with my code, right? Well, if I press escape, that looks different than this, right? Something is happening, right? We'll figure that out because my little rotation.x and rotation.z on the else statement, that's what's happening, right? So it's got to be fixed. We got to clamp that somehow. All right. So that's one. Let's try and do it again, and this time we'll press it right away. So, ta-da, yay, and no matter what happens, I've got good control, and I can move all the way around. This gives me more of an idea of where I'm looking at. By the way, what you might want to try and do is instead of making a line that looks like this, maybe you want to give a player, for example, if I want to give a player almost like a debug, this is a debug that I put on, right? Eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this direction line off and on by setting my debug values. Is my debugging on, then I'm going to see the direction line. If my debugging is off, my direction line is going to be invisible, right? But what if I want to have a debug so I can see what's my angle of view? Let's say, for example, I have a gun, right? Or some kind of scope or something. But I only want to have a 60-degree, kind of angle of fire, right? I can draw two lines, right? To kind of show that, that's 60 degrees, right? So anything that's in there will be what I'm looking at. For now, this is good. So what I'm doing here is okay, right? This is what I want. It's clamped, right? But when I disable, something's wrong. Let's go back to my code and see what I've done. This is good. The line is okay. This is what I want to see, right? This is going to help us to understand the direction. Well, down in here, where I did this else, something's still not right with this thing, right? And of course, the way to fix this is to make sure that it's not player rotation that we're clamping. It's setting angular velocity, right, to a new vector of 0 when it's not, where everything else is, when it's falling. If I'm falling off the scene, then I want my angular velocity to be 0, 0, 0. And if I was to do that and let it fall, right, then that should be pretty darn good, right? Both ways. And that's going to prevent us from having that issue. Okay, now the problem is I'm still moving forward and backward along my X and Y axis, and I don't want that to happen. I want to move forward and back depending on where I'm looking. But that's where I need my direction. How do I figure out my direction then, right? One thing is adding the direction line, but the other one is declaring what my direction is. And the other question is, when do I want to define my direction? Do I want to do my direction inside my game loop for the first time, as an example, or do I want to define my direction outside my game loop, right? I need to define my direction somehow, right? So how do I figure this out? Anyone have an idea? I could, that's really complex. I like your thinking though, but that's not the thing. Anyone else? Come on guys, I want you guys to think a little bit. I can't give you all the answers all the time. Well, we want to add a direction vector for sure. But remember, we have something we've done before where I've said something like this. I've said, that things that we do here, if you remember things from Unity, if you've done any kind of work in the other program before, then you should know that in Unity, we have vector 3.forward, vector 3.back, vector 3.0, and so on, right? I don't think we have that here, right? We don't have that kind of setup. But it doesn't mean that we can't make it happen. We don't have anything that's already pre-built for us at this point, right? Oh. Come on, guys. What else? If I was going to define this thing, what would I do? Before the time runs out, we have a few minutes. Well, okay, here's a hint. We know our direction, right, is when we define our direction itself, right? When we start thinking about direction in general, it's an angle, right? Our direction is going to be an angle, right? And if our direction is an angle, right, then what kind of object should it be? It can't be just a vector 3, because if it was just a vector 3 object, there is no angle, there's no direction attached to a vector 3 object, right? It can't be that. So it's got to be something, but it can't be just a vector 3 object, okay? So how about this? How about we do something like this? Let's make it an any for now, and then decide after, right? So we'll go back, and what we'll do is at the top, right, without declaring what it is, we'll say something like this. We'll say our var up here at the top direction, which is our player direction, itself is of type any. Okay, now there's a reason for this. If I declare this as type any, that means I can assign anything to it, right? Now I want some code hinting because it's going to get a little bit sticky when I want to do something to it, right? Oh, God. Get killed here. Here's something we can test right away if you want to know what it is, if you don't want to do any. You can always do something like this. If it's a vector 3 object, right, I can define it now. I can kind of make it so it's a new vector 3 object, right? And I can kind of make it so it's 0, 0, 0, right? But if that's true, then I should be able to do something like this with it. I want to be able to do something like this. Direction.add vectors. That works, right? Because this is a new thing that comes with 3. PGS allows me to add vectors. I can add a vector A and B. That's a new piece of formula that I can add. So that looks pretty good as a vector 3 object, right? So just to get a hint, it might be good to think about direction as a vector 3 object. Okay. The other thing that we want to kind of understand for us is, you know, from a if it's going to be a vector 3 object, we have to set the initial direction to something, right? Now, if we set it to 0, 0, 0, right, that's okay, right? But then what's going to have to happen is we're going to have to decide that there's going to be something like, I want to add in there my direction itself, which is the original direction, and my velocity. Because my velocity, depending on where I'm pushing from, right, is going to change my direction, right? So that's going to be the new facing, if you will, right? If I add 2 forces together and I'm pushing to the left, top left with 2 forces, I can take this vector 3 object, right? We're not going to initialize it there, right? Doesn't make any sense. We want to make it so that our direction is initialized down here somewhere, right? Let's just go back into here. So we're going to go back into here. And just like we have velocity as a vector 3 object, now we have to be careful. If I do it in my game loop, it means my direction is going to be reset every frame. That doesn't make any sense. So it's got to be somewhere in my initialization, right? That's where it's got to be. In fact, it's got to be even before I have pointer lock. It's got to be up here, right? Just when I do my blocker and have pointer lock and mouse controls. Down here, my player direction has got to be right here. So direction is equal to a new vector 3 object. Let's assume it's a vector 3 object with 0, 0, 0. Okay. Now, this is new. We haven't done this kind of vector addition before in the exact same way. I'm going to set my angular velocity down here, but what I want to do is, this is where I'm kind of changing changing the player's rotation, right? Changing player's rotation. That's what's happening here, or direction, if you will, right? So I'm doing this already, and I've got my players changing the angular velocity. But one thing I also want to do is keep track of direction. And I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say direction.add vectors, right? I'm going to take the original direction that I have. This is the way you do plus equals, right? Plus my velocity, right? Whatever it is. And that's my direction. That's first. Second thing is, and this is where I had to do a little bit of research for this one, right? Direction.apply quaternion, right? That's a new one. Apply quaternion, right? And it's player.quaternion. Now you're going to say, what the hell is that, Tom? Right? So this makes sense. It says, hey, take my original direction, which is 0, 0, 0, and add my velocity to whatever velocity I apply, right? So if I go on the x and the z, right, or the x and the y, wherever it's going to be, I'm going to apply my vector to it, right? That's going to be my new direction. And here, my direction applied quaternion means take my direction and apply my angle. Whatever angle that I have for my player, take my player's direction or player's angle and apply it to my direction. And that's going to be my direction, right? Okay. And notice how we did player apply central force velocity. And that doesn't make any sense anymore, right? We can't apply central force to velocity anymore. We're going to apply this to direction, whatever the direction is going to be. The direction is going to be a vector-free object that's going to be calculated by these two values right here, right? Instead of it being just straight x and y, right? So it's going to be angle and direction, right? So as I turn and I apply my force, wherever I'm pointing to, that forward force is going to move my player forward, right? Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to say something like this. I got to be careful because, I mean, I don't want to flip around. Let's leave it like this for now and see what happens, and then I may apply another absolute value, stop me from flipping over or whatever. All right, let's go back and see what happens. So I'm falling, right, I'm playing, and then I move, and then I press W, and then I move around, and oh, wow, what happened? Let's try that again, right? So there, I played, I move forward, disappeared. Woohoo! See that? It's flew. What happened? Right? Let's try that again. Right, something happened. Something's not right. Something ain't right. I like the idea behind all this, right? But now I move and then I apply some force, right? But now, and then I'm gone. How come? Still around, by the way. Still falling. Let's try this again. There's something wonky about this whole thing, right? If it's truly a vector-free object, right? So move left, press some force, and then as I move, it gets forcey, right? And then gone. Let's just to make it easy, let's get rid of our sphere for a second, just to clear the board a little bit, right, for ourselves. I think this needs to happen, right? So I'm going to go back up here and see where our sphere geometry is. I'm just going to comment out the scene add, right? So I'm just going to go on my line 205, which I'm going to comment this out for a second, and this one. I'm not going to add I'm going to instantiate it, but not add it in, right? But it doesn't kind of cause any effects. So there we go. So you can see what happens here. Okay, boom. So our thing falls. But here we're pointing in the right direction. I press forward, and whoa! What happened? How come that happened, right? Everything was working fine, right? Well, I'm doing two things. I'm adding my vector, and I'm adding my vector all the time, every frame. And so I got to clamp that speed. And this is where I can clamp it with an absolute value, whether it's positive or negative energy. I want to make it so that if the absolute value of the linear velocity on the x-plane, right, as an example, is less than 20, and my linear velocity on the y-plane is less than 10, right? That's important. Then I'm going to apply central force direction. Otherwise, we're going to have big problems, and I'll see why. And these are all tested values that I work with. Let's try this out. So going back down here. So before I do this, right, which is crazy, right, I want to do this. I want to say, up here, I want to say if math.abs, right, player.get linear velocity. I'm getting the linear velocity from the player. That's what I can get and set. .x, so the linear velocity on the x component, right? If that is less than 20 units, right? And, so double ampersand, right? If math.abs, absolute value, right? Player.get linear velocity. And let's do the y for a second, right? Let's see y in a second. Is less than 10, right? both of those things are true, then and only then do we want to apply central force to the character. If it's greater than that, we're not going to do anything. It's going to max out at 20. That's what we're saying. Again, there's things we can play around with this to make it more sensitive, less sensitive. And should it be part of the controls? These are all questions we have to ask ourselves, right? Where did I get this from? Where did I get math.abs, right? Math is the math class, abs, absolute value in JavaScript. And what I'm saying is take the absolute value of x, and that means it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative energy. Positive means direction, right? Positive means moving forward, moving back. I don't care what it is. If the speed, the velocity is less than 20, I'm okay. But if it goes greater than 20, it's going to like fly me off the board, right? And the same thing goes with y. But y, linear velocity y. Maybe did I mean z? Maybe I mean z here, right? You got to be careful about this. We'll talk about this in a second, right? Just try it out. Refresh. I drop, play, and then I press forward, and oh. Okay, hold on. Did I mean, and that's something else, right? Did I mean Z? Well, hold on a second. Z, if I go Z and go to 20, right? Let's just do one of these. Say 20. 20 units maximum, right? Okay, good. He's going to fall, right? He falls down. Here's my direction. I move around. I go forward and back. Oh, it's better. It's better. What's really happening here, right? Let's go try it again. 20 units every time I press. So I'm falling, I control my fall, I move forward, and I got this really weird, whoa. The hell happened there, right? How come this is happening to me? Why? Well, let's take a look. I want to apply central force in the direction that I'm going. This is the right thing to do. This is the smart thing to do. Right? So wherever I'm moving, I want to take this idea of applying central force to the direction. But my challenge is I don't know what my direction originally is, right? Like when I turn my head, is the direction correct? Is it set correctly? Like if I refresh and I fall, we're kind of timed out here, but we'll kind of pick this up next time. I move to the right and I press space and I'm getting this wobbly motion, right? If I space up, I'm like, woohoo, right? That's a lot different than before now too. Well, here's one of the reasons why it's happening, right? One of the reasons why is these values are messed now, right? I can't use 400 anymore, right? So let's put them down to like something like 40, right? Even more, even like less than that. That's like, that's kind of crazy. Let's reduce these values, right? That's one thing. And let's try it again. Change, moving around, and then moving forward, and moving to the left. Whoa, and I'm trying to move down to, and I can't seem to, well, I'm gone. So something's not right. I mean, it seems that if I don't touch my mouse for a second, right? So let's just not touch my mouse before I let you guys go. And this is the hint of what's happening. I'm not touching my mouse, right? And now it's moved. And if I move forward, I'm actually not moving forward. I'm moving like left. And I'm moving to the right, and I'm actually moving at an angle to the right and to the left. I'm kind of moving in that direction, but it's actually, look what's happening. It's even like resisting me to fall over until he gets to the very edge, right? So I'm almost there, but there's something missing, and it's my direction. What's my original direction pointing at? Should it be 0, 0, 0? Is that the direction, right? Or what's my base value? And that's what we have to play with next time. So we'll fix this next time. We're almost there, and we can move around. Once we've got this moving around stuff, we can add the camera controls, and we have pure mouse look, right, going on. Which is I know we can do this like we did it in Unity in one day. We just dragged and dropped a player controller on the screen, and we're good, right? It's not so in 3JS. 3JS, we got to work, baby. We got to work hard, right? Okay, guys, thanks so much. We'll see you next day. Remember the quiz. Don't forget the quiz.